So this perk actually gives you super energy by getting kills, and we thought initially that this would be like a really OP or really powerful perk inside the game because getting your super back is so, important. And I think this Thresh perk will be either S tier meta or at the very least A tier meta.
I went into a private lobby, tested the bejesus out of it, and found hard evidence that it 100% did not work in PvP. I wondered if maybe that was by accident, but had read a ton of comments telling me that the phrase combatants in the Thresh perk description meant that it was only supposed to be a thing in PvE. Fast forward to last night, turns out with the latest big patch that came out in D2, you know, the one that nerfed the Revenant Hunter and the Behemoth Titan and all that, contained a hidden buff that Bingo forgot to mention in the patch notes. That buff, funny you should ask, Thresh actually works.
Which is that in the recent patch, there was a patch note that was missed. This is confirmed by community manager DMG, and that is that the Thresh perk now works in PvP. So here we have on Twitter, DMG tweets out saying, "Psst, Thresh works in the Crucible. We missed a patch note."
Well, I picked this one, Rapid Hit Thresh, and after I looked at the gameplay and thought, well, that was pretty fast. Long story short, DMG sent this out. Yes, it works.
The other night, at like 9:30, he said, Thresh works in Crucible. We missed the patch notes, which is kind of a big one, considering we just grinded for a number of Adept Palindromes last week, and I deleted so many Thresh rolls.
Now, I still don't know if it was supposed to be that way all along, or if Bungie thought, f it, let's make Crucible even wilder. Either way, for the love of God, if you know that a perk isn't working the way it should, and you're making plans to change it in a future update, tell the damn community. Mother do you have any idea? Do you have any idea how many Adept Palindromes with Thresh I've deleted in the past 7 days? I'm pretty sure that one of them had Quickdraw and Ricochet rounds, and I feel like I'm throwing up now. Are you happy, Bungie?
Dear Bungie, the community is understandably in a bit of an uproar right now in regards to the Thresh perk now working in PvP. And frankly, I don't think it should have been changed. Now, I know that a handful of people are going to disagree with me on that, but I have two pretty good reasons as to why I think Thresh should have just stayed the way it was. And lastly, I have a complaint with how you handle perks in general in the game. My first reason is that Thresh specifically says Combatants. It says specifically on the perk list that it will give you super energy off of Combatants. Generally speaking, this has been hit or miss within the community as to whether this actually applies within PvP or it just stays within PvE. But generally speaking, whenever the word combatant is used within the game, it pretty much exclusively applies to PvE. There are some exceptions, but those are, by their very nature, exceptions and not rules. It makes it confusing for us as players, especially newer players, when they get into the game and they're trying to learn how these perks work, and they get something like that where it seems to be a generally well-kept rule that combatants means PvE, then for whatever reason it suddenly starts to work in PvP. I would rather consistency be the root of where we make perks from, rather than having it be on a case-by-case basis. Because as an experienced player, this isn't too much of a problem, but then we start to get into weird edge cases like Charged with Light mods that seem pretty damn strong on face value, but then we try to take them into actual Crucible and they don't work at all, and it's very disappointing. My next big complaint regarding this is that we had recently, well, I guess it's not we, you had recently nerfed Chaos Reach because of the amount of super energy that it was able to hold on to. It was able to keep a good portion, roughly 50% of its super energy, if it used it and then canceled it right away. The main reasoning behind this was that it was doing a lot of interesting things, shall we say, to the meta within higher tier of play. The ability to essentially say no to any given fight or say no to any given super is quite strong. It was understandable that the nerf actually did come through. Not everybody agrees with it, and I completely understand that. It wasn't necessarily a problem subclass, but regardless, there seems to be a consistency error here. Do we care about getting a lot of supers in the game, or are we trying to pull it back a little bit? Because the nerf to Chaos Reach seems to indicate that you don't want supers to be super prevalent within the game, but then Thresh comes out as a new buffed format within PvP, and it completely defeats the purpose. Arguably, it could be even stronger with certain setups with things like the Nezarec Sin, the Mantle of Battle Harmony, and of course Geomax Stabilizers always being a staple. Appending to that idea is the removal of things like pump action, remote connection, those types of armor perks that would give us more super energy whenever we would get a kill with a certain type of special weapon. Thresh is an interesting middle ground, as it's allowing us to essentially fill the missing mod slot that we used to run for that. Like, I remember always running things like double pump action on my Warlock Bond for shotgun, just because I would get a lot of shotgun kills in the game. It tended to inflate the amount of supers that there actually were within the game, and it tended to push special weapons even higher up in the meta as if they weren't already strong enough. Now, Thresh is interesting because it requires you to explicitly give up a perk on your weapon. So, for example, let's imagine that this goes in the same spot as something, let's say, like Kill Clip. Is it worth a Guardian to give up Kill Clip versus Thresh? Good question. I'm not entirely certain what that answer is. But here's the thing. Regardless of everything that has happened here, whether Thresh ends up being good, whether Thresh ends up being bad, there's a clear lack of clarity from whether or not things are getting buffed or whether or not things are getting nerfed. It would be so much nicer because I know, just like how Fallout said in his video, I know I have deleted a handful of roles that would have been considered god roles if Thresh ends up being a really good perk, but now they're gone because I never expected this to actually end up working. There was no indication from you that this was something that I was ever meant to hold on to as a PvP perk. So what do? It just feels bad because I know I've deleted those weapons, but now I have no way of getting them back. Now I have to go out and regrind. Now, some players might say that's okay, it gives you something to do, but what if you're a player like me who doesn't want to go out and grind? What if you're the type of player that enjoys the game on a more competitive level and would rather just have the stuff that you want to play with and wouldn't want to have to spend all these extra hours doing things that you would realistically rather not do? You just want to jump straight into the game. But what about those players who, like myself, maybe are interested in going out and grinding? It doesn't feel like you've respected their time as players because now they've essentially had god roles that they've, I'm sure, probably either have gotten rid of or have thrown somewhere in the vault or whatever it may be, and now they're gone. They can't get those back. Obviously, you can't just refund weapons, as weird as that may be, but it's in an interesting spot. Obviously, this whole situation would have been avoided had there been an upfront level of clarity from you regarding whether Thresh was meant to work in PvP or whether it's not. And I'm willing to bet, judging by how you've interacted with us as a community and how this patch note kind of came in sort of in the back door, that you weren't intending it ever to work in PvP, but it was sort of a last second decision. It was sort of a off the cuff, let's make this work because why not? Now, in the future, I think that there needs to be a high level of clarity regarding how perks work within the game. Specifically, I would love to see some type of distinction between there being just straight up final blows and combatants. I don't want to ever have to do any type of guessing work as to whether the word combatant in a perk is meant to mean that I can use it in PvP or it's supposed to stay in PvE. It's incredibly frustrating having to take it into a private match just to test it out. And if it's supposed to be that combatants are just supposed to mean everything in general, then open up the other perks that don't work in PvP right now to actually work within that more competitive scene. For example, the Charge of Light mod, Protective Light, literally does absolutely nothing for you within PvP. You get your shields broken and you have a charge of light, you get literally 0 damage resistance. I would much rather there be more variance within builds and playstyles rather than less. Throwing out Protective Light as another example, I would love to be able to slot that onto what I call my Titanfall build, my Icefall Mantles, Whisper of Chains, Stasis Titan, and be able to be even tankier if I'm able to get a charge of light. I would much rather trade out my high energy fire mod for that. But right now, it doesn't work. And the thing is I looked at things like Thresh, and I wonder, is it supposed to work? Is this supposed to ever be something that I'm supposed to be able to use? Or am I wasting my time having this pipe dream that some of these quote-unquote combatant perks will be something I can use in the future date. It's frustrating. I am not a fan of it. Clarity on these types of things will be very, very nice to have. You've been pretty good about communicating things in the past, but I don't know why this one tended to slip through. But I don't know why this one just slipped by. If there ever is something like this in the future, please at least learn from this mistake, because it's frustrating knowing that I've probably gotten rid of a god roll of this perk. And to my first point, I don't think that Thresh will be something that either... It's one of two things. Either it's still not viable, it still doesn't feel great to use, and it's just a waste of time anyway, which is never great. We want a lot of things to be viable within the game so people can have variance in playstyle. Or alternatively, it does end up being an absolute god tier perk, and we start to see supers every single round within Trials of Osiris again, and completely flip the Trials of Osiris meta on its head again, back to being a heavy intellect based, farm your super, get your super first, win the game style of play. I don't know how to feel about it, but maybe the comments section has better thoughts or feelings on it. And for the people at home who are watching, of course, consider subscribing. If you have an idea, or if you have an opinion of your own, drop it in the comments. Hope you enjoyed. Bless your faces, and deuces.